Okay, so a quick run through of the outline of Rivers of London, the role-playing game, intended mostly for my players, but if others choose to watch it, so be it. Couple of headline comments. I was already a fan of Rivers of London, even if I hadn't read every book end to end. I certainly haven't read the graphic novels. I've not been the world's biggest fan of Call of Cthulhu. I love the idea of the game. I love all the history. I find the mechanics a little bit daunting at times. And I have particular challenges with the sanity mechanic, which I think many people in other lives have commented on, so I'll just leave it at that. So this is recently released and really, really good. With all those comments in mind, actually outstanding. Possibly, one of the best implementations of of an IP, I guess, that really kind of resonates. It's right up there with some of the stuff Free League achieves, with things like Alien in particular, which I think is probably the seminal example of an IP implementation. I think this does this very elegantly, and I think it's really well thought through. The other comment to make is Paul Fricker, who wrote it, is obviously, and Lynn Hardy and others, are exceptionally skilled. That's very clear from reading this material. It's interesting to note Ben Aronovich, and I hope I've pronounced his name right, was also pretty heavily involved, pretty clearly from some of the interviews that I've seen with him, so that's pretty amazing as well. So they've actually had the actual author of the books really quite heavily engaged, which could explain some of that commentary I just made about how elegantly it delivers on the promise of the game. So Rivers of London, high-level overview, police procedural meets urban fantasy is probably the simplest way to put it. So I always picture the bill, actually, and certainly when I run it, I intend to kind of get that vibe going, which is a much smaller crime story maybe than the books themselves navigate. Magic has never quite gone away, but seems to have gone away, and then it comes back in the books, and characters are running around trying to deal with villains who are, misusing magic or powers. The name explicitly references the fact that there are these things called the Genii Loci, which are basically the gods of places in Roman mythology, and in particular the gods of rivers, which is hence the name. So there are multiple gods of rivers. In the game, it's explicitly stated that these are not gods in the sense that they emanate magic from themselves into others, or that they are the creators of things. Rather, they are the emanations of things. So the Genii Loci create, or rather the places create the gods and offer them the bargain, because most of the gods are actually originally human, although not all of them. And it's quite a bit of interest there. Right, so that's probably as much of an overview as you need. If you like the game and if you love the books, you'll know it all, and I don't need to talk about it. Okay, so first of all, let's just kind of go through what we've got here. So there's a bit of the usual overview. There's this thing called the domestic. Alright, so the domestic is like a short form adventure to introduce you to the rules. It's kind of a find your own adventure sort of thing where you make different choices and you go to different places and you explore it. It's kind of cool. Not really for me, I'll be upfront. I've never been a fan of soloing, and I'm still not, but a really elegant way to implement the rules. It's right up front, so if you're the sort of person who wants to get into the rules first, I'd skip this section, then come back to it. But if you're the sort of person who wants someone to sort of illuminate the rules and how they're going to function, then this is a great starting point. And I think that's probably the question you need to answer for yourself when you tackle it. Then there's the character creation section. It's really good as well, and I love these little Punch and Judy kind of pieces of advice. They're really elegantly done, they're quite informative, and there's lots of really nice tidbits all through it. When you create a character, and I've done a video on this, you go through a process of creating a character, obviously noting the setting, which is that sort of police procedural. Your assumption that should underpin the design of your party or your character is you're going to be part of sort of the extended concept of the police. And I say extended because you don't actually have to be a police person. You can be a civilian consultant, and civilian consultant could be someone who's a specialist in a particular field. You could be a lecturer, you could be something else. And there's some pre-gens at the back of the book that will sort of explode out those ideas. But you could also be a civilian consultant who happens to be a fairy. Another video I've done also. So there's civilian consultants, and then there's police who, hunt crime. It's a UK version of police. So really key point here is you're not going to be carrying a sidearm unless you're very specifically trained, and actually in the books the characters learn magic to the point where they can kill someone with magic, and they have to go off and do a special training course and be specially vetted because they're now effectively a deadly weapon. So carrying weapons comes with a certain weight of responsibility in the English system that probably isn't mirrored certainly not in police forces in Australia, where, that's not fair. Obviously that weight of responsibility is applied, but it is standard for police to carry firearms. It is not a special characteristic of particular police, which it is in the UK. And that's true also of the US, where police normally carry firearms. So the idea that there's a special group is quite unique. So you go through the character creation. It's really well done. It's quite elegant. Small side note, if you want to create a character from the Demimonde, which is those fairies or the quiet persons, those rules are covered in the appendices, in the additional rules at the back of the book, which is quite useful. Alright, so there's a whole section on that. Then there's a whole section on skills. So skills break out into these three areas. So you've got a skill list, you've got common skills, expert skills, and combat skills. They really represent kind of what they sound like. So there's only 2 combat skills in the game, really. Technically, you could expand it out to 4 if you add some other things. So let's just quickly cover those off. So there's fighting, which is basically everything to do with hand-to-hand fighting. There's firearms, which is everything to do with shooting people, shooting things. This includes bows, by the way. There's athletics for throwing things at people. So if you happen to have at hand a club and you want to hurl it at someone, be prepared to use your athletic skill. And then finally, if you are so graced, magic skill is the skill you use for throwing fireballs and other nasties at people who you don't like or who are causing an affray. So those are your 4 combat skills. Most characters will only have the first 2, which is fighting and firearms. You can have common skills, so there's about 9 of those, give or take. Might be slightly more actually. I should probably pull up the character sheet and go through this. So you'll see that in the character sheet there's a sort of, just as in Call of Cthulhu, there's a breakdown of the character sheet and what each section does. It also walks you through sort of how you create a character, which is quite elegant as well. Love the art. Not quite sure about the characters, but there it is. So you've got your skills. When you create the character, you make a choice about whether you're going to be a magic caster or not. If you're human, so that's an advantage you take. So you get these things called advantages. If you take the advantage spellcaster, then you have access to casting magic. If you don't take that advantage, normally you'll have bought 2 other advantages in its place to give you some other special abilities. Chapter 3 covers off the basic rules, and these rules are reduced. I should note though, and I was listening to another YouTube video where someone was talking about this. There are 58 pages of rules. For Cthulhu, I understand this is quite a shrunk list. For people who come from, say, a world of smaller rule sets, that's quite a big list. With all of that in mind, the rules are incredibly elegant, and the reduction in the number of skills that you actually normally play with. So you have common skills. Oh, I didn't talk about expert skills, my apologies. So expert skills are explicitly that, so they're skills only available on the basis of expertise. So most characters don't have them. You get them as part of an occupation or as part of the design of your character. When you choose an occupation, you'll get what are called required skills. Sometimes those required skills are expert. So for instance, if you're a police person, you'll get the requirement to take the expert skill law, as in the law. And so you add that to your character sheet. So they represent the sort of things that not everyone knows. For the common skills, if you haven't increased the skill or gained it, it will always have 30%. So you're assumed to know enough to get around. So you can drive a car, you can navigate, you can understand what people are saying. Expert skills, if you don't have them, you can attempt to try your luck, which is you spend luck and then you can roll a skill check against a stat that's most appropriate to see if that works. Otherwise, you can't do it. It's not available. So experts for expertise. So anyway, we were talking about basic rules. So basic rules, 58 pages of rules. Skill rolls, classic, sort of Call of Cthulhu, so 2d10. For percentile, this is, so you're rolling percentile dice. You can spend luck to increase the amount of the roll, or you can spend luck to push the roll, which means re-rolling. If you push the roll and you fail, it can be really bad, particularly if you're casting magic, by the way. If you push a magic roll and you fail, that is a very bad thing to do because you can get very nastily hurt as a result. Anyway, basic rules describe skill rolling. They talk about lots of options around how push rolls work, which we just talked about. They give you some guidance on bonus and penalty die and how they apply. So a bonus die is normally an additional dice that you roll, and then you choose the best of the two best dice of the three. So you can effectively say, well, I'm going to keep the 2, not the 6, and so I'm going to get 21, not 61, as per the example here. Penalty die, same in reverse. You choose the worst die, not the best die. So not so great. Anyway, you can have a read through it. It's beautifully laid out. It talks through the rules really intelligently. Once again, very impressed. Just noting it is that 58 pages of rules. Newtonian magic section talks to magic in the game. So a couple of really key ideas. So Vestigia is the sort of emanation of magic, or the emanation of great violence or significant emotional events. There's a whole bunch of rules about it. It can be used to give clues to players, which is why they spend a lot of time talking about it. It's quite useful in that sense. It fades quickly. The rules describe on what ratio it fades and all of those sorts of things. It also makes the point that certain types of materials hold on to Vestigia much longer than others, and interestingly, most of those materials are older materials like stone. Holds on to Vestigia for a long time. The magic system itself is pretty well done. So in the books, there's a whole description of you combining different types of lower level effects to get a greater level effect. So Fireball, to use the really clear example, and it's explained in here as well, is a combination of 2 low level spells, one called Wear Light, one called Impello. So Wear Light creates a little ball of glowing white light. Impello creates the ability to move something at speed away from you, or to push it. You combine those 2 effects to get to Fireball, and then you can shoot basically a burning little orb into people. And as a matter of fact, at that point, the character in the books has to go off and do firearms training, because he's now effectively carrying a deadly weapon, which I described earlier. So that's that trigger point, right? So when the way the system works, though, obviously, because they had to kind of work out how it would work mechanically, is it's like a tree. So we'll just skip past the Signare, which is very cool. We'll go to the trees, because there's a whole stack of description. All right, so here's a simple tree. Let's get a really busy tree. Yeah, the Impello tree, which is... Impello is the low-level spell of the game, because it pretty much drives all the other, attack spells. So to be able to learn Carcula, I need to know both Impello and a W would suggest Wear Light. I can also then learn Wandering Light, and you can see it's 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th order spells, and even 6th. So as you go up in complexity, you can learn more complex spells. Each spell is individually, though, so this is kind of a really key point. And the reason for that, at least in part, is you can master individual spells, and mastery makes the spell more reliable when you cast it, so you get a bonus die when you throw it around, and you're less susceptible to fumbles, which means you're also less susceptible to the very nasty side effects of magic, which I always forget how to say it, but it is, I think it's hyperthermatical degradation, or HTD, which is basically mad cow disease for magic users. Not good, don't get it, it'll hurt. So all of that's described in this section. It's really well done. Pay attention to the spell charts, because if you are a spellcaster and you're going through that process, it's a really good idea to choose those initial lower level spells quite strategically so that you can pick up high level spells. A specific limitation in the game is you can't have more of a higher order spell than you do of the next level down. So it's a pyramid, right? So always a pyramid, so lower level is always going to be at least, it could be a cylinder technically, but it can't be an inverted pyramid. It can't do this. So I will always know more first level spells, or at least as many first level spells as I know second level spells. I will never know more second order spells than I know of first order, and vice versa. I will never know more third order spells than I know of second order, and so forth and so on. Now, the spell list is limited, at least in this initial release of the book, but I would imagine there will be additional releases with additional spells. The other thing to say is you can actually make your own. Like, I mean, the rules aren't really there described to tell you how to do that, but when you think about it, the sort of structure and the relative level of power of the spells is a bit of a hint as to what other things you could do, and you could be drawing from other material, some of it very specific to Cthulhu or other games, but it would not be that hard to add additional spells. Alright, so that's Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is really good. Obviously, it's a game done by Chaosium, so it's almost needless to say, and Ben Aronovich as well, it's almost needless to say that Chapter 5 is goddamn brilliant. So, bringing Rivers of London to life is a whole section on how law enforcement, investigation, and all of those sorts of things work, how you can run crime investigation. It is meant to be very procedural and very kind of, I mean, not real, obviously, because nothing is real when you're role-playing it, but it attempts to mirror a kind of really practical approach to policing, and it gives you a lot of guidance on that. It's really worth reading. I actually found it really useful. One really key point that it makes, which I think is worth noting, and as a non-UK person, I will just have to take it on gospel, is the Met, which is where the game is set, so that's the Metropolitan Police Service of London, actually operates differently to the rest of the counties in the UK, and indeed differently to, I assume, the Scottish and Northern Irish police forces as well. So you would have to adapt it. There are certain realities about the way the ranks and the system is set up, but things like diversity, things like how policing actually works, even police powers to a large extent, and criminal investigations, I would think translate pretty well. So it's really good, great section, well worth a read. The Rogues Gallery kind of takes you through a whole bunch of other characters. So you've got people like Nightingale, who is the actual head of the Folly, which is where the game is set, at least initially. You've got, what's his name, Peter, I skipped past him, there he is, Peter Grant, who is the main character of the books, broken out. You can see he's got his spells all documented out. The one weird thing about the game, at least I found it weird, is it's all written from his perspective. So it's like he's writing the game, which is a cute affectation. And so you do run into a bit of this when he's describing himself in the book as himself and sort of making that clear. Anyway, it is what it is. And you get the NPCs broken out. You also get magical beings, so you get vampires, you get chimera, which are people who have their DNA melded with animals and monsters. You get the quiet people, you get fae, you get all of those sorts of things as well. It's not a giant list of monsters, but once again, pretty basic kind of system, so it would not be hard to create your own if you wanted to extend upon it. Really good section though, if you need it. The Welcome to London section sort of talks about London and what it's like. I have a book I bought years ago as an example of what else you can pick up by the guys from Pelgrane Press. So the Book of Smoke, The Investigator's Guide to Occult London, which also gives you a whole bunch of places and stories and things hiding in the background. Obviously, Cthulhu itself has written endless reams of material on London, and you can go online and find endless material as well. But this is very good. It takes you through a couple of key locations related to the books, so that you know where you can go for specific things. It also takes you through the Folly, which you need to understand, which is the headquarters of the magical branch of the Metropolitan Police, to which you are a member. The description of the game, particularly in this area and in sort of the additional rules also allows you to set up other places. So if you wanted to play somewhere else, so for instance, if you actually wanted to play possibly where policing really was first initiated, which I think is Glasgow. Yeah, sounds right. You could do that. So yeah, so you can, they help you sort of think through what that would look like. But there's obviously a whole breakdown of London, and there's a picture of the Folly, which is sort of a beautiful map. There's a picture of, I think that's more of the Folly. Yes, it is. Okay. Oh, that's right, because he lives. That's right. So there's the Folly and there's the Muse. So Peter Grant lives outside of the building proper because he wants to use electronic devices, and electronic devices and magic don't mix. There's a whole thing. There's an adventure which I'm not going to talk about because I haven't read it, and I'm trying not to read it because someone's going to run me through it, so I don't want to ruin it. But yeah, there's an adventure called The Bookshop, which will take you through it. It's also apparently a really nice setup of understanding how to break out a module and how to set up a case file, which is kind of what they're intending. The other thing I'd point out at this point is it might be worth looking at something like Blade Runner, which has just been done by Free League, to sort of think about other ways of laying out case files. You could be thinking about some of that other material as well, which might help you. Then you've got the whole section on additional rules. So these are all the advanced rules that you could apply. So there's age. You can do that thing where you actually get experience packages, which I've seen in investigator packs for Cthulhu, where you take an experience package. These will give you more more skill points than you would otherwise get, but you get a disadvantage in return. So you don't have to take it if you don't want it, and it's obviously an advanced rule, so up to you if you use it, but you do have to take disadvantages. So you get disadvantages sort of broken out here. Some of them are not. Not a magical bone is a bit sad, because you literally will never be able to cast magic. The other one I like is Iron Blooded, which is you are just antithetical to magical beings and they hate you for it. There's some guidance on creating additional occupations, which is cool. So noting what I said before, so this is where you can also look at creating your own organisation outside of the Folly. There's guidance on how you do that. There's also guidance on troop play, so I think this is really worth paying attention to, right? So the game itself is actually pretty well set up for like a West Marches style game. You could actually have multiple people. You could almost run it like The Bill, right? Which I referenced at the beginning. Or, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, to use a more modern example, or Beverly Hills, if you've got a really bad memory. So you can actually have different PCs and NPCs floating around, because it's meant to be a building up police force, and you could be all investigating crime separately. So there's a whole section on troop play, which I think is always fun. Setting up your organisation. I already referenced it, but there's also how to create a Fey investigator. So this is a non-human investigator, either a Fey or a quiet person. So the quiet persons who live underground, or fairies, sort of talked about that. And there's some guidance on enchantments and making new spells. Enchantments are kind of big in the game, in the books anyway. So demon traps in particular appear. They're really nasty, evil magic. That basically creates effectively a mine that, if you don't disarm it, it'll blow up and kill you and possibly other people. You get the concept of wizard staffs located through it. There's a section on expanding combat. I personally wouldn't use it because I think this is not a game where combat should be the focus. But, that's just an opinion. That's one of the things I like about the game. There's additional rules, and then there's some guidance on creating your own case files. So this was that, create your own adventure piece for your players, and it's quite nicely laid out. Okay, and then there's a section which sort of gives you some demo or some pre-made PCs, so you could use them in the adventure that I referenced earlier. So in Chapter 8, The Bookshop, you could obviously just hand these out to a bunch of players and get it going. The other thing is it also gives you a pretty clear vision for how characters can be set up and what they should look like. I think one one question, and it might be in here and I might just have missed it, that's worth paying attention to, is if you're a civilian consultant and you're learning magic as a thing, you're not a member of the police force, can you be taught lethal spells? Because you're not allowed to carry a lethal weapon under most circumstances in the UK. It's not standard for people. Anyway, just something I thought about just then, which is quite cute. Then there's a background piece which has all the rule summaries and sort of takes you through that. If you buy the game from Chaosium, which is the better path, by a country mile, you will get the cost of the PDF discounted from your inevitable purchase of the hardback. The other thing is that you will also get a whole bunch of downloads that I thought were really useful attached to it. I'm sure they're in the DTRPG one as well, but I did like it. And yeah, there's some maps at the back. It's kind of cool, and there's a nice index. Actually, there is a nice index. It's quite well done, and it's linked, which we love. Okay, that's it. That's the walkthrough of the game and the rules. So, hey guys, when we play, pay attention. Bye.